Patchogue to play tennis for a college in Pennsylvania. Met a woman there, had a child. She got some sort of cancer. They didn't have any more kids. They got divorced. Patchogue is 60 miles from Manhattan. Europe is 3,000 miles from New York. Both are as far away as you could want to go. Of course, there are some who will go to Tasmania to really get away from it all. And if you live up on East 86th Street, just off of Park, coming down to this apartment on 2nd Avenue and 5th Street is almost as far and requires as much thought and setting of schedules. I miss Jean. All those years in between, no way to catch up or begin again. Probably some awful Latin poem about this problem. I miss Jean. I miss a whole fucking lot of people. Most of them are not yet dead, with the exception of John Courier. Most of them are still alive, but they might as well be dead as far as it would be possible to get again any sort of friendship. As if we have been carving out our coffins and are unwilling to make a little room. We get used to the wood shoulders, the feel of the wood at our feet, the soft padding on our backs, and just don't want to make room at this late date, 20, 25 years after the last time. Or am I all wrong? Young people are only genitals at various stages of excitation, and here is not the moment. Those moments, all just imitations learned from the movies without the dissolves, phase, wipes, jump cuts. Now, as if the wrong soundtrack got stuck within the mouth of this guy sitting here in the city. Jean has a life to lead and to be led by. So do I. I am doing the traveling at this moment. Rita, to change the subject, sex and a degree of intimacy lived on South Ocean Avenue, and strange for a Catholic girl, did not go to St. Francis de Sales. Or am I jumping to a conclusion without doing whatever the logic demands? She had an Italian last name, lived in a large white house behind thick tended lawn. The house could have been a funeral parlor or a mafia residence, foot soldier level, but all this is thinking only to the point. Rita had an Italian last name, lost when she married and moved to Texas to take up the occupation of being a wife to a man who has a wife, was involved in their 4 children's education, and does some volunteer work on the side. Airport supervision is her husband's field of work, or he is about to go into the soft drink line. Really thought she was going to end up somewhere. Well, we all end up somewhere, just no telling where is going to be. Far away from this room, I hope. All of this is far away. Rita was the editor of the high school yearbook, a cheerleader, and a member of Phi Beta Kappa. She was never unfriendly to me. She did not have to ride the school bus. Pretty girls didn't have to ride the school bus. Can I make a rule of human behavior in these United States? A pretty girl does not ride the school bus. How to explain to a person in Sofia, Bulgaria, what it means to ride a school bus? Or for that matter, how to explain to Marina in Milan, a woman who is a translator with a doctorate in English, what it means to ride the school bus. Chopping myself up and losing the thread of what I am supposed to be doing to ride a bus. A school bus when one is a teenager. The humiliation of being stuck in those seats with all those other kids. The 30-minute ride, stopping to see you tomorrow. Tomorrow as if it would be any different. On and on and on. A second to compose yourself for the day after the day of the classroom and then the home. If we could get the emergency door open, we could throw who was it out the back door, and no one would not even his parents would miss him. June of 1958 is clear in my head. I would be 14 in October of that year. The next year or so is unclear. The metal feel of a gym locker against my cheek as my head is banged against it. Standing in a gym in a gym shorts, the heat turned off, standing never so conscious of being so short. The coach took a certain pleasure in pitting the short guys against the tall ones for basketball. In a Catholic high school, to be tall is to be closer to heaven. In a Catholic high school, to be tall is to be closer to heaven. this was going on in Patchogue? Why did I have concern that the heat was turned off? Why didn't head against the locker happen earlier in the year? Something is off. Florence. She changed her name to Flo when she was an adult and the mother of 3 kids. How appropriate, she said, her name. A nurse since she was a kid and the oldest of 10 brothers and sisters. Got into a convent after 8th grade with the idea she wouldn't have to be in the kitchen all the time on her hands and knees cleaning up after the kids. But the convent was exchanging children for adults who had never grown up and were just as demanding, as petty, as foolish, and most of them were waiting to fall in love with her. Florence came back to Patchogue a year behind everyone else and was no longer, but she was already going out with the man, then a boy who would later be her husband. I delivered the Long Island Press to Florence's home, collected for it on Thursday. She smelled of baby powder. Once I saw her dancing with her sister in front of the television. It must have been to American Bandstand. I didn't like the kids on the show, all Italians, American Italians from Philadelphia. Watched her dance and thought even then dancing was a thing of the past. For this kid, I had at one time been able to did dance in St. Francis de Sales Hall for some sort of dance. I remember he's a real jitterbug. With Cynthia McInerney, she went away to a convent. Her brother never wore a coat even during the winter. A coat made you soft and you didn't feel the cold, and it's hot more months of the year than it's cold, so wearing a coat gets you out of shape for the summer when you don't need to wear that much. I would ride my bicycle past Florence's house on South Fulton Avenue up to Laurel Street and then down to Lee Avenue because you could see the back porch, and I was thinking if I didn't see her in the front of the house, I would see her in the back. Never did, and I thought of this driving past Melinda's house, always looking and not having the lyric gift, not living 400 years ago, getting myself reduced and dismissed into some psychological category. All this writing is taking place, the radio says it right now, on a day called Thursday. I have gone out to Patchogue and come back. In the mail, a change of address card from Norrköping, Sweden. I am still alive in Sweden, or my life is still important in Sweden. They want me to know where they are moving to. Francis finally got out of Patchogue all the way to Bellport, via Florida and Texas. I have known him since 1st grade, maybe even before that in kindergarten. How I remember the kindergarten had a rubber knife and it was taken away from me by the teacher who made me sit under a desk as a sort of payment. Linda Hubel was in the class, as was another blonde girl. And this other blonde girl had 2 brothers, also blonde, and they also lost, except I remember they had narrow faces, something like that. Francis, he lived around the corner off Cedar Avenue. His father was a huge man, well over 6'6". There was a brother equally tall who went away and was eventually in the diplomatic service. Francis was shorter, and I am just. He was always fat. He cried in 2nd grade when he was sentenced to wear eyeglasses. All of his classmates were looking to the future with no help from a glass lens. Francis stayed on in Patchogue and was with me when I drove over to Mattituck the last time I saw Melinda. He must have helped me back to Patchogue, left me off at the diner on Main Street. You were a real mess, he said later. A real mess. Francis was almost married a number of times. Francis has taught school. Francis has collected tolls on the bridge going to Jones Beach. Francis has played golf. Francis manages the cold cuts department of the shop over in Port Jefferson. Francis moved to Bellport after his mother died and his father remarried. Francis hasn't seen his brother in many years. Francis doesn't have anything to say to his brother, but has lived all of his adult life outside the United States. Francis doesn't play ball anymore, but should. Francis and I used to play tennis all the time. Francis was the manager of the basketball team at Patchogue High. Francis twisted his toenail in the 5th grade and has been a minor legend ever since. Francis and I played strip poker in the ruins of the old swimming pool down near the Mascot Dock. The guy who lost had to stand to be naked to the sky. Francis and I rolled around in the water off the sandspit dock when there was a beach there. Francis and I didn't have hair on our balls. Francis and I felt warm together. Francis and I never talked about this ever and never will. Francis and I sounds like a title from Christopher Street. Francis has never written to me. Francis is one of those guys from the old hometown who stays in the old town, who makes you feel like you have missed something in the old town, though you know you really haven't. Or again, using the word town is always complicated out in Patchogue, because in Patchogue is an incorporated village within the town of Brookhaven. So it should be something like back in the old village. Francis stayed except for the times when he was away, gone away, and always comes back. Francis is too young to move to Florida. Florida is where people move to when they are fed up with the island, with the village, with the winter, and all the shit moving out from the city. Francis wasn't slow in the derogatory sense of the word, and not even in regard to that was not inside his brain box. Francis moved at his own speed. We all got our own speed, and when I decide to do something, I do it, and not until then. Everything gets done, just don't rush me. You're not like Francis, Mom would say. Look how far you went away to school, all the way out there to Wisconsin. Do you think anybody else in Patchogue went that far to college or had to go that far to college? You've done everything you've ever wanted to do. I would ask Francis what happened to Melinda. What had he heard? She was engaged to Larry. She was married. She was divorced. She was married again. Melinda was married to the mouse, Larry the mouse. And here's a story in the midst of that. Lost in this world because of that loss. Well, you did get off to Bulgaria and meet Lilia. Came back from Europe later crying because it did not happen again. Plot. A man living in the city, he takes the train to a village out on the island. He walks around the village. He meets a number of people. He comes back to the city. Nothing could be more straightforward. Nothing could be easier to follow. Everybody likes a complete store journey. Plot. A man living in the city decides Europe. He has been there before. He lives in New York City. He goes to Europe but cannot decide which country he's going to. He does not know if this matters. He's going to Europe. Possibly it doesn't matter which country he goes to because it would needlessly complicate the whole idea of going away. People just want to know you've been away and vindicate the country. But then heaven forbid to go into details about the country is to invite more than I wanted to know and more than he knew he was walking about. And who cares? Really, who cares? I'm going away next week anyway. My version is just as good. Everybody is alike these days. Just get me to the postcard shops so I can buy a postcard of what I have seen or not seen, should have not seen. Just say we have seen it all and there was no reason to have gone, but we had to go. Otherwise, we would have lost our deposits. And what would we have said to plot? A man is out in the village of his childhood, he is thinking of where he would like to be, and is there at the same moment through the miracle of modern fiction. He has no need for that dreary realism of one place at a time. Seems like a failure of the imagination to expect me to stick to the itinerary of the writer. The Long Island Railroad to Patchogue, to jump off the train at Penn Station might just as easily be jumping off the train in Köln at 2:30 in the morning, having to catch the train from Hamburg because he wanted to get the train that hooks up with the one to Calais so I can get to London in time for the early evening train to Dublin via Holyhead because I want to meet at the station in Dublin in this prose. All aboard, all aboard. Marty, Jean, Frank, Melinda, and I should drag in Joe. Joe stayed in Patchogue, did not go away. He has to be a father within a year of getting out of high school. He has become a cop and eventually got to wear a suit. He's good looking and looks good in a suit. He knows and knew how to smile. He makes you feel you're a part of the team, even if there was no season or sport. He knows when to leave a guy to the getting on with what he has to do. Just one of those guys got the knack for getting on in the world. He knows how to dance, how to shake hands, how to smile, how to say he is sorry when he hears your mother, father, husband, wife had gone down for the count, down the tubes, up the creek, or just belly up on you even when you were hoping. Joe was the sort of guy girls get crushes on, and guys don't get pissed off because he is always just one of the guys, not one of the boys, because he is never really down there, muck on his hands, and no one expects him to be. He has never left Patchogue. How I do go on about these people, as if they care. I do care a little about them and worry about seeing their names in the advance on the obit pages. I have mostly stopped looking for their names on the marriage pages. How close they all are coming to the cut, the shudder, the shiver. No ghost stories for me. It's all too close, always has been. Thank you very much.